Hey everybody, this is Isaiah Diesel at RG Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. And before I get started, I want to say one thing. Bryce, come on down. You just won a new car.
If only that were true. That would be life changing right now. But I appreciate it.
you will win a new card from Starbucks. that's
new card.
That's the joke there.
Hey, I'll take it. I'll take it.
We send out the Starbucks card. This ain't the Oprah Winfrey show here. But that being said, I do want to start off. We are going to get into a friendly fire round, but I do want to say off the top, like Bryce, I really think you need to become a Christian. You ready to hear my reasoning why? Maybe my reasoning is going to be totally different than what you might think. Ready?
Sure.
Okay, because in the Bible we're told to share what we have. Like if we have 2 jackets, we're supposed to give one of those jackets away. And the last time we were on, I had discussed maybe you donating a few inches off of me of your hair to me, and you haven't sent that to me. So I'm just saying maybe if you're a Christian, you might have done that. But okay. That being said, I'm just joking around. But
there's much better hair that you could get than mine.
I don't know about that. I think I might Jerry curl your hair if I get it. So that being said, I do want to start off by asking you a quick friendly fire round because we like to keep these conversations pretty light. And even though some of the topics are pretty contentious, we don't have to be contentious ourselves. And so we just like to ease in something really nice and easy. So you ready for that?
Sure. Let's do it.
All right. Your favorite boy band of all time. And don't say Motley Crue. I'm talking about like poppy boy band. Okay. Because Nirvana was technically a boy band.
Yeah, got favorite boy band. It's splitting hairs, but I'm probably gonna have to go with NSYNC.
NSYNC. Okay.
Yeah.
And how about this? Yeah, you kind of got the hair
like reasons, or does it matter?
Let's hear it. Justin Timberlake, the hair. Okay, but what's the reason?
I think that NSYNC is the only boy band. I think they're actually one of the few artists that have ever sang live and danced at the same time. And there's been a lot of other groups that have tried to do that, and a lot of other artists, but they usually lip sync. So,
all right, and okay, here we go. If you had to eat one item and one item only for the rest of your life, what would that be?
Probably oranges, just because I think the health, getting vitamin C from the thing that I'm eating, and they kind of taste good. So,
all right, man, you should if you ever come to Korea, you got to try the tangerines from Jeju. They are amazing. They're to die for. Okay, here we go. We got a couple more. But next question is what item would you want if you got on a deserted island? And don't say a boat or anything like that, but you had to have one island. If you could have one item with you on an island, what would that be?
Probably a Swiss Army knife.
That's a good call. And the last one.
Either that or a Leatherman Gerber multi-tool type thing.
Good call. And the last one is, by the way, did you ever read that book, Hatchet? That guy, all he had is a hatchet, survived.
I have not. I've not even heard of that.
Yeah, it's like a kid's book. Okay, and then the last one is, how just slipped my mind. I'll have to see if I can improvise. Oh yeah, favorite foreign film of all time.
Favorite foreign film. Possibly Run Lola Run.
That's a good one.
I thought it was a really interesting the way they executed it.
Concept.
One of those time loop movies was really cool.
Yeah, you know what? So I do want to ask you a quick question about that. Have you ever seen the movie The Butterfly Effect?
I have.
Okay, so that is one of my top 5 of all time films. And I really strongly believe in that concept. And it really strongly causes some cognitive dissonance inside of my views on Christianity, because I do understand a simple fact that if you could go back and rewind someone's life and just change one event, that you could literally wind up changing the whole trajectory of that person's life. And so some of that stuff happens just by total freak accident, like literal like chaos theory. It is like literally like chaos theory. It could be just one person who decides to run a red light one day, and that little one thing could like trigger multiple events. They could almost hit someone. That person's gonna have a bad day. They walk into work. You know what I mean? It's just like it can trickle down for so many different things. There's all these little chaos theories going on, and butterfly effects happening simultaneously. And so for me, it just doesn't really seem like you could just judge someone just directly for their one little life right now. It doesn't seem that way. I was wondering if you have any thoughts on that before we get started. We're not really going to talk about God today, but
I mean, I think that I agree with you that, in accordance with chaos theory, the, minute changes could have vastly different outcomes or effects on people's lives. I do think that we judge people based on what they do. But, I think that this is going to get into a whole morality discussion, which is really long and probably off topic. But I think that for the most part, people generally tend to make decisions based on the information they have available to them at the time and based on the circumstances they find themselves in. And hindsight is 2020. We always think, well, what if I could, what if I should have done this instead of doing that? I should have turned left instead of turning right. But we don't have that to work with, right? So yeah, I think that people ought to make the best decisions that they can make given the information that they have. I will say that I do think people should seek out as much information as possible so that they can arm themselves with as much information before making decisions. So I don't know if that answered your question or not. But
thank you a lot. That's really good. That's actually a perfect lead-in, because when you initially invited me onto your podcast, the Bryce is Wrong podcast, we were supposed to talk about the LGBT, right? Trying to find common ground of the LGBT issues, but then it happened to be LGBT Pride Month, and so you just rescheduled, which is no problem, not a problem at all. I'm not complaining at that. The point is though, is that from what you just said, piggybacking, springboarding off what you just said right now, you can't be too hard in your judgment upon me or any other one person, because you don't know what information I have at this exact time. So having these conversations, I would say there's a gentleman by the name, and I referenced him in our talk, but his name is Marshall. Do you remember me referencing that gentleman?
I don't, but I think I know who Marshall is. I'm
okay. So he's a member of the LGBT community, and over the talks of about 10 hours, lots and lots and lots of talks. Some of this stuff is just extremely new and confusing to me. I have to say, when you start talking about stuff like cis, and like if you were to tell me what a trans woman, you say like a trans woman, I would assume that a trans woman would be like a woman who wants to transition or decides to transition to being a male. So just that already off the top, if you don't know that, it's just going to be confusing, and I try to follow the pronouns and stuff, but it's
and
just,
of course,
this is a learning process.
What it is.
I know it's not. I know it's not. I'm just telling you, if you just came up to me and you said that, that's what I thought it was. Okay. So yes, obviously a trans woman would be a biological male who's transitioned to be female. Okay. Right. So, but all I'm trying to say is that this is a learning process. Like if you've started any job, you will know that there's a learning curve, and it can be very, very, very confusing on some things, right? So it's like, we should probably have a little bit of patience to be willing to have these conversations. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. And I tend to withhold judgment or judge people less harshly when they're erroneous about something, when they're mistaken. There's a difference between doing something by mistake and doing something on purpose, right? Like when you talk about misgendering, some people just don't know. And so I wouldn't hold them accountable for them not knowing.
Right. And speaking of which, I will thank Oz. I'm gonna thank Oz again on record. Oz put like the biggest crack in the ceiling for me as far as choosing to adopt people's preferred pronouns. And let me break that down a little bit before. I am someone who would have never misgendered anybody in the first place. I would never have done that. Okay, that's disrespectful to me. That's like dead naming someone. Can you explain real quick what dead naming is?
No, actually that's the first time I've heard the term. So you explain it to me. You're going to be
Okay,
educating
see, there
me.
we go. Right, dead naming is whenever you would call somebody by the name that they were before they transitioned. Okay, so
Okay.
I don't know what
So
Arden
similar to
name is.
misgendering then.
I don't know if you can call it misgender. Okay, it's in line with misgendering.
Yeah, same concept.
Okay. Same concept. Yeah. Okay, this is again still a bit confusing, but I would have never have done that in the first place. Okay. Now, what I might have done is I might have said, well, look, this is not something I personally agree with. If I were to call a trans person by whatever desired pronouns that they want, I would be, in my opinion, misgendering that person because I don't believe that that's the gender that they are. Okay. Now, what I would do before that is I would just speak about them in general terms. So I would not go out of my way to disrespect them. That was never even where I started from. But I just would not choose to acknowledge that pronoun. Now, Oz, I very much thank Oz because he played a very big role in talking. He asked me like, "Hey, aren't you a Christian? Shouldn't you be loving your neighbor as yourself?" And he asked me this on my podcast. I was like, whoa, like he just stopped me in my tracks. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm back to the drawing board, Oz, because I don't know how to respond. I'm not going to take what you said and just dismiss it. He put a really big crack in the ceiling. Marshall, after 10 hours, knocked that thing down. And just, I do want to say one other thing too, because in the Discord, you and I had probably around a 2-hour conversation after our talk. I'll tell you this: the arguments you were making, like I had absolutely no rebuttal to. I couldn't even think of anything. So I'm
wish I
not
could remember
100%.
But
Well, we're gonna get there. We'll hash some of this stuff out. But that just goes to show I'm willing to learn and I'm willing to acknowledge that I could be wrong on some things.
Okay. So have you changed your
So
mind about any of that, or it sounds like you were saying that you've changed your modus operandi, for lack of a better term? You do things differently now based on those conversations,
I
or you're
use
evolving,
preferred.
maybe.
I'm evolving. I hate the word evolution, but there's some evolution
Sorry.
going on inside of Isaiah. I will use the pronouns desired. Actually, be de la Blanca or La Blanca.
Mm-hmm. Vila Blanca.
Yeah, from Skeptic Generation.
I don't know.
Well,
I don't know them personally, but I know who they
okay,
are.
but you know who they are.
Mm-hmm.
You know who they are. Okay. So there, I have to be so careful in saying these things. It generally will just slip out that I will generally misgender someone on accident. And speaking of which, their fiance, Eric, came onto my channel, and in the course of the talk, I accidentally misgendered V multiple times. And so whenever I edited that and I used the word she, I just put in a bleep sound so you can't hear it. So it's like beep, and then I said it again, and beep. The other times I got it right, but it was just an accident. And I said, I want to have the respect for the person. And especially too, this is a no-brainer. If someone's not going to listen to me or my message, if I do that, it's a no-brainer that I'm going to do it. Okay. So at this point, it's just as simple as that. If you're not going to be my friend because I don't use that, or you're not going to listen to my message of Christianity, then that's obviously it. That is the easiest choice I have to make. So, yeah.
So it's actually in your best interest to, if you want to have a cordial conversation, to identify them, but
sure,
by what they want, so that you can
absolutely
evangelize. Okay, makes sense.
Unequivocally. Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I agree. I mean, I don't. everything except the evangelism part. But if that's what you're trying to do, if you're trying to have a conversation with someone and you want them to hear what you have to say, then you have to use language that's going to compel them to want to listen.
Absolutely. Yeah. So thank you, Oz. Even though Oz dropped a lot of profanity on me yesterday on his channel, he called me a lot of really obscene things. I'm going to say thank you, Oz, because you put a very big crack in the ceiling for me, and I've learned a lot from these conversations with people who are not Christian. So that being said, I do want to get into these questions. Okay. This is kind of a loaded question: is why do you feel that hate speech should be legal? Why are you pro hate speech, Bryce? Why do you think that's okay? That's my question to you.
Well, I wouldn't describe myself as pro hate speech, but
that's a joke. That's a joke.
Yeah, I know. As far as whether it should be legal, I think that all speech that's not, for the most part, I believe in freedom of speech. And I think hate speech is kind of subjective. So, like, what are we calling hate speech? Does hate speech have a specific definition? Are we just talking about saying something that might offend someone else? I mean, it could be rather broad, right? So because of that broadness in what it means and the fact that it means different things, I think it's hard to actually say that it should be illegal. One person's hate speech is another person's normal speech. Anyone can be offended by things, so you're eliminating almost all language that way. If someone says that they don't like what you said, should you be arrested for that? I don't think so. So that's the short answer, believe it or not.
So first of all, when someone like me talks about hate speech being illegal, I don't necessarily mean like, okay, you call someone like the N-word and you go to prison or something like that. That's not actually what I'm even referring to as far as saying like illegal. There might be something as far as like a punitive damage, for example. Let's say that we have let's say, and of course we'd have to have this conversation about what words are meant to debase and degrade someone to the point that it's going to cause damage. Okay, so it's a very similar thing when people have like libel and slander. Right, when they bring things like this, oh, you got a cat.
Yeah.
So you have to show that there's been some kind of like damage, okay, like some kind of like punitive damage. So you can't just say, okay, I said Bryce is a really bad, he has really bad hairdo. Something like that. I would have to have done something that's going to cause Bryce is right, the Bryce is wrong, to have some kind of damage, okay. And so what I would say, in order to have one of these cases, so what I would say personally is that if I don't know, maybe I don't know if I would call misgendering someone to that extent, but let's just say we did. Let's just say we did say that misgendering someone would fall into this category, which I wouldn't personally believe that it would. But for the sake of this conversation, let's just say that's what it was. Well, if I were to misgender someone, I have the potential to cause some damage to that person. Okay. They may need to go see their psychiatrist, whatever that day, or they may have some X, Y, and Z damages that are going to result from that. So that's the extent in which I'm going to say, like, I don't think if I misgender someone or I call them an F word or something like that, that's intentionally trying to hurt them, that I'm going to go to prison for 10 years. But I'm saying, okay, maybe I might get like $100 fine or something like that because I'm inflicting some kind of damage to them, to their psyche. So that's where that's the extent in which I think that it should be illegal. You have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that even if, regardless of what the punishment should be, if it's $100 that you have to pay the, the hate speech police, you've decided that misgendering someone is hate speech, but someone else could say not addressing them as sir is hate speech, or calling them sir when you should address them as Lord or whatever. People can make up anything and say that they're offended by something that you say. So who's in charge of, like, right. I guess what I want to know is where would the speech, the specific language and the specific words, would that be codified into law somewhere? Is there a manual that people have to read so that they can know what's okay to say and what's not okay? I just think that that's not really productive, and I think it's going to, like, I understand the sentiment behind it. And from a moral and ethical point of view, I think that people should not be misgendered, don't be a dick, basically. But in terms of, I don't see how we could enforce that in law. Oh, sorry.
Watch profanity, please. Oh, no problem. This is live. Normally I would just bleep that out, but I am going live now, so it's no biggie. Okay, so I get that this would have to be, I guess, a really long conversation, and I don't present myself as a moral police on this. I just do know, I definitely know, because I live in South Korea, which has the second highest suicide rate in the world. And I do know that this online bullying contributes a lot to that. So online bullying needs to be addressed in some way. Actually, interesting. I will say this before I go on to the next point. Candace Owens, Candace Owens?
I'm familiar with her.
Yeah, she's a very belligerent person, but she actually started off because what she wanted to do, she actually used to be a liberal, but she wanted to create this database of people who commit online bullying, and they would get put into here. And I don't know, they were going to release some of the data somehow to somewhere. So like maybe they would drop it to your family or to your work if you were doing online bullying. Similar to, are you familiar with perverted justice? They would pretend to be young kids and then chat with people and have some really explicit talks, and then they would say, hey, if you keep this up, we are going to send this to all of your family and stuff, so you need to cut this off right now, right? It's kind of like a vigilante group, but she had wanted to do something to that same regards to prevent bullying, and so the liberals were very against it, like, oh, invasion of privacy, whatever. And so that actually just caused her to go totally into the other direction, because now she's ironically an online bully herself. But I do want to go to the next question. Is transitioning to other things ever acceptable in any other context? Concerning trans topic.
Are you asking, is it always acceptable for a transgender person to transition?
No. Let's just grant, for the sake of brevity, that's okay. Is it okay? Okay, if I decided to transition to a table or like a lion, which people do these kind of things. I mean, this is not hypothetical, that people put implants in their faces and tattoo their body. I mean, there's people who like turn into leopards. I mean, it's true. It's honestly true. I'm South Korea, man. People come here and turn themselves into elves and stuff. It's aliens and stuff. It's pretty bizarre. But is like, if I wanted to transition to being Korean, okay, is that acceptable? I get my eyes done. Like, can I transition to other things other than just male to female, or the other way around?
I think that you have the right to do whatever you want to do, and whatever you want to be. If you can find a way to be that, then have at it. When you say transition to Korean, I'm assuming you're referring to race and not nationality, right? Because you can transition into
obviously
Korean,
I could become a Korean,
becoming a Korean citizen. But
right,
if you're talking about changing your look,
not according to them, I would never be Korean. Not according to them, but yeah, good.
Yeah, but I mean, if you want to change, if you want to have cosmetic surgery and change your look, you're allowed to do that. As far as I know, I don't know what the laws are in Korea, but I live in the United States, so here people change the way they look all the time.
Okay, let me break this down a little bit. You believe that it is possible for someone to do the course of surgeries to literally start off at one gender and end in another gender. Is that correct, Bryce?
I think that people can transition to a different gender without having surgery.
Okay.
I don't think surgery is not required to change gender.
Okay. But you believe it is possible. Okay, then okay, I understand the point. So throw the surgery out the equation for a second. You do believe it's possible to transition from one gender into another, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to list a bunch of things right now, and you just tell me if it's possible, because you're saying that person will legitimately become the other, right? So is it possible for me to transition to being a 17-year-old so that I can attend high school again?
No.
Is that possible? Okay. And why not?
Because you cannot affect, when you say that you're going to transition into a 17-year-old, you're referring to your chronological age, right? But
okay.
That's something that we don't have the ability to manipulate unless you have a time machine. Gender is more of a social construct, so we can change things like that, but you can't physically, like, you can't change your chronological age. You are the age you are.
So is it possible for me to transition into being the Bryce is right? I would love to transition to you and start getting some of your benefits that you get from serving the military. I thank you for your service, by the way. But can I transition into you and have access to your bank accounts? Yes or no?
No, you can change your name to
God
my name.
dang! Oh. What?
You can change your name to my name, but as long as you don't have my social security number, then no.
No, I'm not talking about all the legal. Just, can I become you? That's the point. That's the question. Can I become? No. I just, for the sake of the argument, I could get your hair and your looks, man. I might do that.
You could become like me, but you can never be me.
Okay. All right. So I can't become you. People can't. Okay. Can I become a dog? Can I become a dog?
Biologically,
ontologically,
no.
A dog.
No.
Okay. No. Okay. Biologically. Okay. No. All right. We're making progress. All right. Is there anything else? Okay. Can I, in the same way, so if I already get this because you said you can do it, and I'm not asking you, could I get those surgeries done? Obviously, South Korea has the best plastic surgery in the world. But if I go through all of these surgeries, am I actually going to be Korean? Okay. Is that going to make me Korean?
It depends. What does Korean mean? Does Korean mean nationality? Does it mean...
No. Obviously not nationality. That's not what we're referring to. Ethnically. Am I going to be ethnically? Am I going to be... you know, it's funny Korean? Because you and I... Hold on. You know, it's funny because you and I have to have this debate. But I can tell you this from the view of South Korean people. Just show you how vastly different this conversation is.
Well, that was going to be my answer, by the way.
Which is what?
It depends on what the Korean people say, because they're the ones.
No, okay, then that's completely. It doesn't matter if I got everything. It doesn't matter if I were to get the surgery. It wouldn't matter if I were to become a Korean citizen. I would never, ever. It would be impossible for me to become Korean. Now, they take it a step further. Listen to this. Are you familiar with a guy by the name of Cho Sung-hee?
No, I'm afraid not.
The Virginia Tech shooter, the Korean dude who killed like 30 something odd people.
Okay, I'm familiar with the massacre at Virginia Tech, but I don't.
Dude, South Korean guy by the name.
As a rule, I generally don't use the names of any mass killers if I can help it.
That's probably a good thing.
I don't care to remember their names.
Yeah, I understand. I understand where you're going with this. And speaking of South Korea, we don't have guns here, so we don't have to worry about that happening here. But okay, so that guy, you can call him a guy, that being moved to America when he was about 7 years old. Okay. And so became American citizen and stuff. And to them, and this is really weird. This is really weird because they no longer see him as Korean anymore. They're like, oh no, he's clearly American, you know? So somehow or another in their mind, it's able to go the opposite way around, you know, and this is just some double standards, I guess, that people have, because to them, that guy would no longer be Korean anymore, you know? So it is a little bit of a weird thing, but I do want to transition.
What do you think about that? Because I think that's a great example to show the point that I would make about race and ethnicity, which is that it's a social construct.
Well, I don't agree. Obviously, I don't agree with that. I believe I am Mexican. For many years, I used to dye my hair because I used to hate being Mexican. I used to dye my goatee and eyebrows blonde because that to me was perfect beauty, was having blonde hair and blue eyes. And I literally hated being Mexican. But I could have done that from here to Kingdom Come. I could have gotten surgeries. I could have even got my eyes tattooed, or that's possible to do. But that would have never have changed the fact that I am Mexican. So I don't believe I could have transitioned. And I'm sorry, I call you Oz, Bryce. If I were to tell you, okay, so what if I were to come to you and I were to say, I've transitioned back to high school, and actually the school district has accepted that I'm 17 now. Okay, let's say I take some blockers or whatever, and I start to lose my facial hair and all that stuff, and somehow I get maybe some hair implants, because I mean, being a bald dude at 17 years old, that probably really throw it off. But see, I get some hair implants, okay, and I go there, and I'm attending school, and I'm playing sports, and I'm beating the hell out of a lot of people in sports. But if I were to tell you, hey, Bryce, I've made this transition, and then you were to say to me, Isaiah, I don't believe you made that transition. I believe you could get whatever procedures, whatever chemicals. I don't believe you've done that. Would that mean that you hate me? Would you hate me in that scenario?
If you asked me and I replied that way?
Yeah.
No.
Okay, so this is the same exact way that I feel towards trans people. I have not even one iota, not even 1%, because part of it's because I grew up with body dysmorphia, and I know this is a real thing. I grew up with BID. A lot of this related to some really traumatic stuff that happened in my childhood that I really wish didn't happen, but it did, okay? So I have that empathetic understanding of what it's like to be uncomfortable in your own skin. And I will get this on record, because I will share one of these things. I'm not going to go through all the details, but it used to be the case, and if you can see here, I have a little bit of hair on my arm. It used to be the case that I would pluck out all of the hair on my body, okay? And I would it was an insane OCD thing where I would literally like line them up in rows. And I would spend hours and hours and hours every week doing this. And my girlfriends thought it was the weirdest thing in the world. And they were like, we don't have a problem with you shaving your body. Like, actually, I still shave my body a lot. Most places on my body, I still shave. The thing is, though, back then, is that it wasn't a choice. I did not, excuse me. If I were to go out, let's just say at this length, it's like a quarter of an inch right now. I let's just say I forgot to shave that day, and I would be out in public. I couldn't think about anything other than my arms. So if I was at school or whatever, at college, I couldn't concentrate. I had to go back and shave. And that is a horrible thing to have on your mind, to be that uncomfortable with yourself, to feel that there's something growing on you, and it's going to occupy your every thought. I totally get it. There's not 1 ounce of judgment coming towards people like that, because I totally understand it. But that being said, if you were to come to me and you were to say, hey, Isaiah, I'm thinking about transitioning to being a fish or whatever, and so can you help me cut off my arms and legs, go with me, be along with me in the process? I'm going to tell you, Oz, I love you, bro. I do not think you're going to, I don't think cutting off your arms and legs is going to make you a fish or a snake. And I'm going to be here every step along the way to try to help you to get help. But I feel like I would be not very loving or compassionate to go along with that. Okay. So do you understand at least where I'm coming from? Can you understand that?
I understand the analogy you're trying to make, but I think it's a poor analogy. I don't think that that's an appropriate comparison to transgender people.
Go ahead.
Please, so the first problem is the transition that you were talking about in your hypothetical, and you've mentioned a couple of different things. You mentioned fish, dogs, different species or whatnot.
Age,
sure. These are things that are not possible because you can't change. Chronological age is not something alterable, and uh, genetic makeup is not something that is alterable. Gender is alterable because gender is not necessarily biological. Gender is a social construct. Transitioning from one gender to the other becomes possible. This is why it's possible to do that regardless of whether you have surgery, because surgery is altering your biology, right?
Mhm.
A lot of transgender people do choose to do that as well. Sometimes they go hand in hand, but a lot of times they don't. Gender is about how you identify. It's about the gender that you associate with, that you see yourself as. So that can be changed, right? Nationality can be changed by moving. That's something that's changeable because that's not something that's, tied to your DNA. That has to do with where you live and your citizenship. So that can be changed. So yeah, when you're comparing like biological things, like sex is biological. There's the difference between sex and gender, right? Sex is biological.
Well, I mean,
Gender has to do with identity, and a lot of people get them mixed up. They confuse the two of them because you were about to say
I didn't
something.
really
I'm
see
sorry.
those things. I don't really see those things as differently. But the only point,
Okay.
hold on. But the bigger point in all of this, Bryce, is just to understand. Is I want you to understand, from my perspective, it's coming from an area of understanding. Okay, I'm understanding where these people are coming from because I've gone through the whole feeling trapped in the wrong sex thing as a kid. So there's that.
Mm-hmm.
The point is that after lots of counseling, after a lot of meditation and all this stuff, I've become more comfortable with who Isaiah Perez is. And if I would have done something, I don't know, the way that I dealt with it was doing lots of drugs and traveling and promiscuity, in another lifetime. But the point is that all the things that I was filling myself with, would be it gambling, be it prostitutes, be it alcohol, whatever that was, it didn't like solve the issue that I had internally. It just like masked it for a while. So all I want you to see is that we can have these conversations, but understand there's not one iota of hatred that I have towards any trans or LGBT. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't even be having a conversation with you, a bi
Well, I'm not accusing
man, without.
you of. I'm not accusing you
Well, I
of
have been.
having hatred.
Uh-huh.
You know, the reason I think that what's important is I totally get that. By the way, I
Hmm.
acknowledge what you said. I don't view you as someone who is hateful,
Hmm.
intentionally, trying to harm other people that way.
Yeah.
I get it, but the problem is if you can put yourself into a transgender person's shoes, when they hear an
Okay.
argument like the one that you just made, and they understand what's inappropriate about the argument, can you understand why it would be offensive to them to compare their gender identity, which is something that people can and do change, to the biology of going from human to fish? I mean, that's kind of an offensive comparison, because the two things don't really. It's an inappropriate
Correlate.
analogy.
Okay. I would say in principle, I believe that it's an appropriate analogy. But if you're telling me the language that I'm using turns people off, then
Mhm.
obviously that's something this is why I need to have these conversations, because how am I supposed to learn if, I mean, literally, like literally, I want to tell you what happened the other day. So I went into the Skeptic Generation Discord, and I asked B. I said, B, how does it make you feel knowing that I'm willing to go along with your pronouns, but like I'm not personally convinced that you're not female? You can tell me you're non-binary, um, but to me, it's like that's not a. I, if I were to tell you that, I would be lying. I would be lying to you if I were to tell you that that's what I believe. So this just has to do with, I generally want to know, how does my inability to believe in something, how does that affect you? Okay, so I'm gonna tell you what she said. One, I'm sorry, they. I cut myself. See, it's a learning process. They told me that God, I can't. would be. I apologize because I can't bleep this out right now, but I did catch myself. They told me that, God, I actually feel really bad when I do things like that, you know. So I actually did call in and I did apologize to them, but they told me that they would not want to be a close friend of mine, right? Then another person gets on who's a transgender person, and they say, I wouldn't even want to be in the same room as you. Okay, that's what they told me. They would not want to be in the same room as Isaiah Perez because Isaiah Perez is not personally convinced of a proposition. So you don't accept Christianity, Bryce. I totally get that, and I totally respect that, and I understand that because I wasn't convinced for many years. But what if I said, hey, you know what, Oz? I don't want to be in the same room as you because you got curly hair or you're black or whatever it is. That's like an offense. How are you not taking into consideration my thoughts here? So I understand maybe I need to phrase things in a different way. I'll get that. But understand, this is just I'm not saying it's not true. I'm not saying it is or it isn't the case. And what I believe actually is irrelevant. If that's what they believe in, more power to them. You know, I'm not someone who goes out and tries to attack them. But if I get asked my opinion on something, I'm going to tell you my opinion. You know what I'm saying?
I think it's important to distinguish between the two different responses. And because you started off by saying V's response was, I wouldn't want to be friends with you. And then some other person said, I wouldn't want to be, I wouldn't want to be close friends. But then you said really quickly, and then some other person said, I wouldn't want to be in the room with you. So we're not saying that this is V's position, right? This is just someone else, right? There's multiple different.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I meant to.
Okay. Now, the only thing I can say to that is one of the things that I do on my show and when I have discussions like this is I try to share knowledge and bolster understanding both ways. You know, I like to get to know what other people believe, why, figure out areas where we agree, and then figure out areas where we disagree, and then figure out why we disagree to see if we can come to some sort of resolution. And I think V does, and I think V does something similar to that on her show. And so when you encounter
I'm glad you knew.
On their
show, I caught you.
Yeah, there you go. So I apologize about
that.
Hey,
just so it's obvious, even people of the LGBT community do this. Whoever's watching, I caught him, I caught myself. So it's legitimately a mistake sometimes, right? Okay.
It is.
Keep going.
The issue is when you are trying to do that and you're trying to figure out why people disagree and someone is not willing to have that conversation anymore, then I can understand V's position of saying, okay, well, then I can't have future conversations with you. Because basically what your position is you don't understand it. And you're not really going to try to understand it anymore. You're just going to call them what they want to be called for the sake of convenience and being cordial, but you're not really interested in figuring out why you disagree or going for some common ground beyond that. And so,
well,
does that make sense?
Think but that's not accurate what you're saying. That's not accurate what you just said, but because I am willing to have my mind changed. I'm just saying where I'm. Hold on, but Bryce, this has to go with just where people are whenever they get information. You know, I remember whenever I was about around 20 years old, I was dating this girl, and she told me that she was reading this book like 1984. And when I look back, I hadn't read that book at that point, and actually it wasn't until about 8 years ago that I got my hands on 1984, and it literally is my favorite book of all time. Okay, but in that book, bro, they torture this guy, and the torture scenes are incredibly intense, and they literally start like just disintegrating the person, and they're trying to get him to be convinced of something that says 2 + 2 is 5. Okay, and he physically can't do it, and he's being judged for it, and they're gonna. They said, we're going to kill you. We're just going to, if you don't believe this, we're going to kill you. And so he actually is able to force himself to do it for like a second, but it slips very quickly. But that's the situation I'm in right now. Doesn't mean I hate anyone. Doesn't mean that I'm not willing to learn. But if you put it like this, Bryce, if you put a gun to my head and to my daughter's head and said, you need to be convinced of this right now, or we're going to blow out the brains of you and your daughter. Okay. I'm telling you, we would be dead. We would be dead, because that's just where I'm at right now. Now, you convince me later on, that's a different story, right? If you convince me and I change my positions like I did with the pronouns, then it's a different ballgame. But
yeah, but
as I stand right now,
the question is, are you willing to be convinced? That's really what it comes down to. Like, if are you willing
to be convinced?
Yeah, it's not a matter of because nobody's putting a gun to your head and saying you must believe that that gender is a social construct and that transition.
Right.
No one's doing that, right? It's just a question of, are you willing to listen to me as I explain my position about why gender is a social construct? And if you say no, well, then we don't have to have any more conversations. But if you say yes, then that's when you engage further.
Okay, well, I just say we can have these conversations, and if I'm being shut down to that level, or to where people on other channels are calling me, dropping F-bombs on me because they just asked me flat out last night, do you believe that this is the case? Do you believe that trans women are women? And I said, I don't believe that. And then they just kicked me out of their live stream and started dropping a bunch of profanity on me. So it's like, that is not it. Okay, well, Bryce, let me tell you this. There's a trans woman, and that person is transitioning to be a woman, and they're tormented by the fact that they can't do something that they feel like they should be able to do, which is like have a child. For the person who they love, which is this man, Bryce, that brings so much pain to me to know that people are out there like that. You know, it hurts my soul. It hurts the recesses of my soul, bro. My position is not based out of hatred, bro. It's a base of like, I just want to get people to accept themselves. You know, it brings so much pain to me to think that there's people who feel that they need to mutilate themselves and you know, and go through horribly painful procedures. Now, if they do that, that's the route that they want to go. I'm like, as I've already said, I don't believe hate speech should be.
I think you should be careful. I think you should be careful with your usage of the term mutilating themselves, because
modifying
transitioning people are doing.
Well, they're mutilating is to cut something. So if you're cutting off your genitalia, that is mutilation. You might not like the word they're cutting off, or that's what it is, though. I mean, we could get into semantics here, but that's what's happening. So to me, that's a painful procedure. Like, I was just watching a video of a trans man who had to have like skin taken from his leg to try to build a penis, and from his thigh, and it was an incredibly painful and long and expensive procedure. Okay, and so he was devastated when his penis like eventually fell off. And so I'm just saying, bro, like, out of love, that seems like if I could prevent someone from having to do that to themselves and just accept who they are at the moment, I'm saying that seems like the more compassionate, empathetic approach. But I do want to go on to this next topic, because we could probably talk about, I'd love to, maybe that's what we'll just have to talk about, that topic alone. But there are other issues related to LGBT rights and stuff. So I do want to ask you this question right here, because we might be able to find some common ground right here. But should churches lose nonprofit status for doing things like being anti-gay or being like anti-gay marriage? Do you think they should lose their nonprofit status? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think any churches should have nonprofit status. If you're asking, should churches pay taxes, my answer is yes. But that applies to all churches as far as I'm concerned. Was that your question?
Okay. For the sake of the universe that we're in, can you answer the question according to the universe that we happen to live in right now?
Well, obviously the answer obviously the answer is yes. If I think that all churches should be nonprofit, should be not have nonprofit status, then that would include the churches that you're asking me about.
Yeah. So, because I mean, I'm generally what I would consider a secular humanist as far as the government is related concerned. I don't believe that the churches should be getting involved in politics at all. I mean, or if they, that's fine if you want to, but I believe that they should lose their nonprofit status in doing so. So maybe that's something that they want to do. Be my guest. It's a free world, but in my opinion, like once you start getting into the arena of politics, you've crossed the line, the goal of what you're trying to do, because we support nonprofits here, which we'll get to in a later what we do. But I do believe that there should be a special arena, people who are trying to do humanitarian work, where your goal is not to make money. Like that's not your goal or intention to do. You're trying to do some kind of service that's going to help out humanity, which I do believe that churches do. But then you start entering into a completely different arena of politics, and at that point, I'm like, dude, you guys have lost me, because I don't see why that's something that it would be like. And I try to explain this to Christians get mad at me that I have those views, but I'm like, well, what would you do if somebody walked into your church and was like, there's a pothole down the street and we want your church to go fix it? You'd be like, that's not our arena. You got to go contact the government. You know, you got to go down to city hall or whatever, call the proper channels. So I'm like you're totally crossing areas that are totally not related, in my opinion. But I guess we
And
can.
by the way, I do agree that there should be that nonprofits should exist. So I'm not against nonprofits, but I'm against.
Why specifically for churches? Then I'm just curious.
Well, it's to me, I think that charities should enjoy nonprofit status for the charity and the services that they provide to people. I don't think that should be, that's not necessarily what a church is. Now, churches can do that. And if they do have a service like that, if that is a function within their church and they have records and they can be, audited to see that, yes, they are providing that, then sure. But they have to actually be doing it. They shouldn't just get that status because they're a church.
Right. Interesting. I had a conversation with, by the way, thank you, Grumbler. He said, keep religion out of politics. 1,000,000% agree with that one. I'm pretty sure I'm more secular than you, Bryce, as far as that goes. I'm like, I don't want government in the slightest sense of word involved. But, that being said, Christians, yeah, one of the reasons why is they want to get the government involved in the things that's convenient for them. Okay? So they want to get the government involved with whenever it starts to come to things like gay marriage or abortion. But then when you take something else, like the Bible also talks about greed, you will literally, the level of cognitive dissonance that would have to exist inside of Christians' minds to say this, because most Christians are like really pro capitalism. They'll say, well, capitalism is the greatest system on the earth because it's based off of greed, and man is by nature greedy. And you're like, that completely defeats all the other arguments you were making as far as the government like enforcing your Christian morality. So it's like people will want to use the government to promote the things that they want to get promoted, and that's my biggest issue. That's my issue with that. It's like I say, government doesn't need to get involved in any of that. It's unnecessary. But I do want to ask you. See another question. We'll jump over to 5. But what is wrong, in your opinion, for having safe third options for transgender people? Because so I'll give you a little bit of context here. In South Korea, at the front of bathrooms, they have like family stalls, and also like handicap stalls. So as you're walking into the various bathrooms, like you don't want to go. I really don't like just in general. I really hate using the bathroom in public, but I would prefer having individual stalls. But what would be like wrong in your opinion by having a safe, designated third area for transgender people? Like, can you give me your thoughts on that?
Well, so I'm assuming you're talking about two additional spaces, right? Because there's transgender men and then
Sure,
there's transgender women. So you're talking
sure,
about adding
sure.
two more options to the restroom facilities that people have to choose from.
Hmm.
Is there anything wrong with it? Not necessarily. I don't think it's particularly the most practical thing to do, but I don't know that I
Hmm.
wouldn't say that it's wrong for businesses or, organizations or facilities to have that if they choose to have that.
So, does it make me transphobic? Because this is, people love to throw around this word, man. Whenever you present anything that even remotely goes against this agenda, and you're just transphobic. Okay, I'm like, look, Christians hate this fact. I say this, I'm like, dude, let's provide a safe third space for sports, for
So, can I interrupt you for a moment?
hold on. Let me finish. That's a really big thing on this channel, is not to interrupt, but so let's provide safe third spaces for sports and for bathroom lockers. Make sure everybody is able to walk into the bathroom that they want and feel totally safe in that environment. So go ahead.
So you just used the word agenda
Uh-huh.
and you used it in the pejorative, right? And I assume you're referring to people who use the term transphobia, but
Hmm.
what is the agenda that you're talking about? Because to me,
Agenda is to,
that is a that is a word. It's kind of a trigger word, and it seems to mean a lot to the people who use it. But whenever I ask someone what they mean when they refer to a specific agenda, they have great
yeah.
difficulty in explaining to me what the agenda is. So I don't know what like the trans agenda mean. I don't know what that means.
Okay. So Bryce, everybody has an agenda. Okay, you have an agenda. I have an agenda for having this podcast. I normally have atheist co-hosts. Unfortunately, I don't have any right now. But normally I have atheist co-hosts. Um, I have used some like non-religious, not Christian or atheist, but just something in between. And so I have an agenda that I'm trying to accomplish here, and that's to get people to sit down and have conversations, crossing over lines, and not being disrespectful, hateful, and genuinely trying to understand things from the other person's perspective. Okay, that's an agenda that I have. So to say that you have an agenda, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying that that's good or that's bad. You, trans people have, or trans activists, they have an agenda to get equal rights, and I totally, if that was my group of people, I totally get it, unequivocally, Bryce, unequivocally. Okay, but if you come along and say we're going to introduce these new things that are going to totally uproot a lot of things, okay, and we want it done yesterday, which is what their mentality is. We want everything done yesterday. I'm telling you, that's not a reasonable thing to do. Okay, now to understand, maybe there might be various times in which we're making progress, or like okay, let me give you let me give you an analogy. Like whenever you go to, let's say we wanted to get to zero emissions or totally electric cars, to say that tomorrow no one can drive a petroleum car is totally unreasonable. It would cause so much damage to a society and to structures and institutions. It would be completely and utterly unreasonable. So I'm fine in trying to find solutions and to be accommodating, but to think that we need to accept 100% of what you say, or we're just transphobic. Like that's what's levied at me. I'm transphobic because I want to see a safe space for everybody. So the definition of irony, that I'm transphobic because I want everybody to be in a safe environment. If that's not the definition of irony, Bryce, I don't know what is.
I
And
guess
so,
maybe the question I
so
was
the point
asking
is,
is
is
what
that
is your definition of the
I've been
transgender
told if I'm like a
agenda?
75% ally in that agenda, then I'm an enemy.
I don't know
I
what you
cannot
mean.
be a 75. I cannot be 85% ally. I am either 100% on everything that you have to say, regardless of my own personal interests, my concerns. I'm either an ally or I'm your enemy. So that
Just
is such
for
extreme black and
clarity,
white thinking.
I'm trying to understand
I
you.
don't really see that being, you know,
Just for
if
clarity,
you're going to speak to people at that level, I'm kind of like, you're going to lose me. You're going to have a 0% ally at that point. You know what I'm
just for
saying? What
clarity,
are your
are
thoughts
you
on that?
saying that the transgender agenda means fighting for equal rights?
You there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Bryce.
Hello? Can you hear
Bryce.
me? Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you. I don't know what happened. Did you hear what I was saying right now?
Yeah, I heard you the whole time.
Okay.
I was asking you.
Please.
No, I was trying to ask you, do you think that does transgender agenda, does that mean fighting for equal rights? That was the only question I was asking. I'm trying to figure out what the agenda was. Are you saying that means people who fight for equal rights?
Equal rights. And I maybe favorable. See this, and this is the problem where I would say it gets to the point where we're having favorable rights, because if you say that boxers, MMA fighters, just need to transition for a year, and then they can, oh my god, and then all they got to do is do these therapies, whatever. And to me, that seems, it does not seem fair. It does not seem equal. It seems like they're going to do some serious damage to women. So to me, it's like it's no longer getting to the point of being fair. It's now you're having an outrageous advantage. So that would be where, like, the caveat that I would put into there.
So people who are for transgender rights are not really for equal rights, they're for superior rights. That's what you're saying.
I would say, yeah, in some regards, not every. If you just want to use the bathroom, like, totally, I get that. But then here's the thing. Then you got to understand, some women are just not going to be comfortable walking into the bathroom with a person with whatever gender they are that has like a male genitalia. Okay. So
how would they know that?
then you're taking away from their rights. You're taking away from their rights at that point.
How would they know that?
So what do you thoughts on that?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Barely.
How would they know that?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, your audio keeps going in and out, so, but I can hear you.
Yeah, my wife keeps calling me. Hold on. I think every time I try to reject it, it like. Just 1 second. I apologize. Bryce, can you hear me?
I can.
Bryce, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me? I can hear you.
You can't hear me, Bryce?
I can hear you.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Now I can't hear you. I'm new to this thing.
I can hear you loud and clear.
Bryce, right now?
I can hear you loud and clear. Can you hear me?
Okay, I can hear you perfectly now. Okay. Anyway, let's go to. I'm not sure where we were right there, but
the last point that you made was that that women will feel uncomfortable with someone of the wrong gender coming into a restroom, and I don't understand why that is an argument that people think makes sense, because I don't know how anyone's going to know what someone else has, what private parts someone else has in the bathroom. So,
well, especially. I hate to say this, but there are definitely a lot of what you might call non-passing trans women, I guess. Let's be clear about this. I'm not afraid of a trans male coming into the bathroom with me. That's not something I feel like is going to make me uncomfortable, honestly. But we're the people who we're talking about who are going to. There's one class of people, and it would be a cisgender female. Okay, a cisgender female is going to be the one person who's going to walk into a bathroom. And under this circumstance, everyone else is covered. We already know that the trans people are perfectly okay to walk into whatever bathroom they want. They're going to feel okay in that regard. The biological males are, and so it is the cisgendered females who are very vulnerable people, we might add. So females, in general, they're vulnerable. So like that's the one group of people that we need to take into consideration. And that's all I'm saying. Like, look, if a trans woman doesn't want to walk into a male bathroom, I totally get that. And if I make that known to like my Christian friends, they turn their guns in on me, Bryce. You understand? Like, I will piss them off if I make those kind of statements. Do you understand that in principle? Right? They aren't happy that I want to accommodate trans. Right?
Yeah, but I don't know that's not really relevant to what.
Yeah, actually, it is relevant. It is relevant. It absolutely is relevant, because my position, I'm telling you, my position is based on one that wants to see everybody taken care of, and both sides think that I'm either being too affirming or not affirming enough. So I think it's completely relevant that both sides are thinking in this extreme way of thinking on both ends. I'm trying to be something in the middle. Do
you think my position is extreme, though?
Well, can you tell me your position?
Yeah, people should have the right to go to the bathroom of the gender that they identify with. It's very simple. Is that an extreme position?
Yeah. If you're not willing to take into consideration anyone else's, like if you're putting priority over from a biological male who's transitioned to over a biological female, yeah, then I would say that's unreasonable.
My position doesn't prioritize anyone. My position applies across the board. Anyone should have the right to go into whatever bathroom of whatever gender they identify with.
Yeah, maybe this is like just a kind of double speak, because I would absolutely say that your position it does prioritize those people, because I've explained it to you. A biological female who walks into a bathroom under those conditions is not going to feel comfortable. And the truth is that I wouldn't want my daughter to go into the bathroom sitting next to a biological male. It doesn't mean that I hate that person.
That's different, though. That's a different argument. That's not. You're speaking from the perspective of someone who's not a biological male. You wouldn't feel comfortable with your daughter, but that's not the same thing as saying women wouldn't feel comfortable. Like, you're trying to make an argument for women and saying that they would feel more comfortable this way or the other. But I don't think you can generalize all women that way. All cisgender women.
Well, okay, you're absolutely unequivocally right on that point. I will grant that point. But there are women, and maybe my daughter's not going to be totally comfortable with that. And so, to me, I don't know. I feel like I'm kind of just in a lose-lose situation. I don't think either side is neither side wants to make compromise, and I think that's a problem, Bryce.
The thing about public restrooms is that nobody has to use one. Like, nobody is forced to using a public restroom. It's optional for everybody, right? So you really don't have to go to a public restroom if you think that you might be uncomfortable with someone else who walks in there. But the option.
You never ate Mexican food, Bryce. You never ate Mexican food, bro. that can kind of. Mexican food kind of throws a monkey wrench in that argument right there, Bryce. But anyway, thank you for having that one. I would like to transition to the next one. Do you believe that everyone is bi, Bryce?
No.
No?
You?
I believe.
Let me elaborate. Maybe you want me to elaborate on that. I am bisexual myself.
Yeah, right. I know that.
Do I think that everyone else is like me? No, because I've met too many people who are not like me. My spouse is not like me. My best friends are not, and everybody is different. I think sexuality is a spectrum, and to assume that everybody is the same way, it would not be based on any science, but it's not even based on my anecdotal experience. I know many people who
Right,
are not
right,
bi. So
right. Do you mind if I ask? We don't have to get into names or details or anything. Do you mind if I ask you about your spouse?
it depends on what questions you ask, but go ahead and ask the
Is
question.
it
And
is it a male or
it's male.
is your
I'm
spouse?
married to a man.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So then this would just be an interesting question. I would want to ask you, like, what is your okay? So we talked about, like, let's just say one is the gayest like an Elton John person, and 9 would be like a Johnny Depp or something. Just this, I guess Wilt Chamberlain. Just say like the straightest guy you've ever seen. On that meter, where would you rate as far as being gay? Or I don't. I know you don't consider yourself more like, or would you? Obviously, I would say it would be a lot closer to the 1, because if you're in a gay marriage, then, like, what is it? Is it more just like a?
Are you
Is
familiar
it
with
a
the Kinsey
physical?
scale?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so the Kinsey scale, which is a bit outdated because this was something done in the decades ago, right? But basically, it's a scale from 1 to 6, or from 0 to 6, where 0 is 100% heterosexual and 6 is 100% homosexual, right? You're asking me where I would place myself on a similar scale than that, right?
Yeah, because that's. I mean, yeah. Can you? It is a little bit. I'm going to use this expression. It's not what you're going to think it is when I say weird. Like, that's. I don't mean that in is weird, but it's like, is it like, do you are like, have you been in relationship? Let me ask you this: have you been in relationships with both genders, like an actual, not just a sexual relationship?
Yes, but not at the same time.
Too much information on that one, bro.
Well, the way
But
you
I mean,
asked the
like, okay,
question, have I been in relationships with
no,
both?
no, God,
I'm
God,
like,
God, God, God. This is a PG. This is a PG
okay.
podcast, bro.
Yeah, I've
Oh, by
had
the way,
relations
Grambler,
with
Oz
both.
does. No, Bryce doesn't believe in God. So he says you have a patience of a God. He doesn't believe in God. So get lost with that one. But but Bryce, God, that sounds really bad that I said that. I really did not mean to
I
use that word.
I know what you were mean. I know
Because
what you meant. The answer is
but the
yes,
thing
I've
is,
had relations with both.
because I personally believe that most people are, and especially if you take off the social constructs of it, most people probably might go both ways, if there was zero social stigma behind it, you know. But so
Why do you think
and
that?
this just I've met enough people to, most people are either willing to experiment, or maybe just out of morbid curiosity, or maybe because we can just appreciate beauty, like I could take a look at Johnny Depp and say that guy is beautiful, actually it doesn't even have to do with the sexual, not necessarily, but like a Bradley Cooper, like, Jesus Christ, that guy is like, has the most perfect bone structure I've ever seen in any human being on this planet. So
I'm just for my curiosity, would you identify yourself as bisexual?
no, but I will say this, because I've already mentioned some of the dysmorphia that I've grown up with. So there was definitely a lot of confusion and experimentation growing up. Um, yeah, there's plus the trans. I mean, I'm gonna be honest. The trans issue. One of the things that makes it so weird and uncomfortable for me personally is because, I mean, I'll be honest in saying that there is some attraction there. So it's hard to. That kind of makes you feel like, oh, does that make me gay? Does that make me bi? Like, what I mean? It is a bit of an uncomfortable feeling. So
The
this
reason I'm
isn't
asking
all.
you the question, the reason I asked you the question is because your answer was no. I'm just gonna, unless you choose to change it, but the answer I got from that was no. You don't identify as
I've
bisexual.
experimented with that. Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah.
Okay, so that based on the fact that you are one such person who does not,
Mhm.
can you understand that a lot of other people would also similarly not identify as bisexual?
Sure. I was
You
just
may have,
asking
I
your
mean, you may
opinion on
have
it.
your opinion about them, but
Yeah.
you know, you only have what people have to go off of, right? Some people would say that everything that you just said would make someone bisexual. Other people would say, no, it doesn't. So even the definitions are
Right.
subjective.
And actually, that's what I was trying to ask. That is the nature of the question I was asking you. Like, do you like? Is it your preference? And I obviously, this is, now that I know that you're in a gay marriage, like that's kind of answers the question, because obviously you obviously have more of a preference towards
Not really.
men.
Not really.
You don't? Okay.
No, because
Okay,
I
then
could
I'm
have just as easily ended up in a marriage with a woman. I just
okay.
happened to be the marriage I ended up with happened to be the person that the most recent person I fell in love with, I should say. But
Really?
that could have
Well,
been that was the fact that it was a, you know, had this been 15 years ago and a different relationship had gone another way, I might be in a different marriage.
okay. So you would literally say that. Sorry to cut you off.
No, I was saying that doesn't, what marriage I ended up with doesn't necessarily speak to a preference or that I have one way or the other.
So you would generally say that your attraction is literally like 50%, like just straight down, you're a straight shooter? Right,
I wouldn't describe it that way because it oscillates. Some days I'm more interested in one, and then some other days I'm more interested in the other. So it's not it's not consistently I have, you know.
As much as I have a morbid curiosity about that, this is a PG.
I was going to say, I remember you chastising me earlier, telling me it's a PG. Yeah. So you're asking me. I'm happy to answer whatever questions you have.
No, because I'm not going to lie. Some of that is just flat out morbid curiosity.
Well, you can ask me about it offline about that.
Yeah. So I will give you. So last night I'm being accused of transphobia, homophobia, Growing up with the kind of dysmorphia I did, I got viciously verbally assaulted by people calling me freak. The other F word that they use for homosexual. That experience has made me very naturally empathetic towards gay, bi, trans, whatever, trisexual. Try is you're willing to try everything, which is like I would consider myself back in the day. But just to let you know, like the level of comfort I have with like gay people. I wouldn't do this now because I'm married and I have a wife and I'm a missionary now, but it used to be the case that I was so comfortable with gay guys. I mean, I had a gay friend, and this is going to sound like the worst thing you've ever heard right here. It's going to sound like this is simultaneously like the gayest and the straightest thing, because he was just like a bit of a nudist. And so at his house was like total nude, just like clothes are optional. So he'd go there, take off my clothes. We slept in the same bed naked, and I even gave him a back massage because I just like, and he actually kind of tried to make a little pass to me, and I'm like, dude, I'm straight. Like I'm interested in that, but that's the level of comfort I would have with a gay person. I wouldn't do that now. I'm just, if anyone tried to paint Isaiah Perez as being homophobic, it's just not true. What a homophobic person would do something like that? You know, it's just, I'm not intimidated. Like, and this gets right into the last question. This will lead into the last question I sent you. I'm kind of like a live and let live. I'm sorry. 1 second. My mouth's a little bit dry. I'm gonna grab some drink real quick. I ran out of boba. I ran out of my boba. So, you like bobas, by the way?
I like Boba Fett.
You like boba what?
Boba Fett from Star Wars, the bounty hunter. I don't know what
the
boba
drink.
is.
Boba. Okay, was that your attempt at humor? Come on.
It was. I told you it's very dry, but true Star Wars fans would have gotten it.
Yeah. So Bryce, before we get into this last question. I really deeply want to thank you for your time you've taken. I know these can be some uncomfortable talks, but the fact that you're willing to have a conversation with me and not use profanity at me and trying to understand I'm coming from a place of love and compassion, and I'm learning, I really thank you for taking the time, man.
You're welcome.
This is obviously something that's affected me on a personal level very much,
I can see.
So, you ready for the last one?
Yes.
Okay, I am a live and let live person, right? Obviously, you should just know this, that I am not going to be okay with like a gay marriage personally. Like I probably wouldn't have attended your wedding, and I happen to believe that's a sin. I don't want to vote to stop you from marrying. If someone comes to attack you, I'm going to defend you, whether that be physical or online. I don't believe there's people like Darth Dawkins who are using homophobic or language that's designed to try to hurt people like you or Arden of Eden. I'm going to stand up as an ally and say this is not right, and I'm going to call it out. But I'm kind of like I believe that we have free will from God, and I believe if that's the route you want to go. I would have, before you got married, I would have highly suggested maybe dating a Korean woman, because they are kind of inclined towards Korean women. But because I think that's just my own personal preference. I'm just kind of a live and let live guy. Like, you should have those rights. No one should be coming after you. No one should be abusing you. And so the last one is just kind of like, last question is, do you believe that everyone should just keep their lives private and just be left alone? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I think people should be left alone if they choose to keep their lives private and they're not harming anyone else. I don't think that, there's some caveats there, because some people will argue that they have I don't want to use a group as an example, but some people do some shady things in private where there is actually harm, and so that you don't get to experience the privacy of your own home if you're actually harming someone else there,
Right.
But for the most part, as long as you're in a consensual thing with, if you're talking about marriages or sexual relationships or anything like that, as long as everybody has consented to everything, then yeah, that should be a private matter.
This says Bryce seems like a nice guy. He's a nice guy when he's on my channel. When I went on his channel, no, I'm just kidding. We've had some great talks, but I want to tell you something really weird. This is really weird. Dude, I actually just found out that I've been associated with the cult almost the last 2 years, bro. And it just came out like last week. I mean, that was a weird experience. I wasn't, because I live at the bottom of Korea. I come up like once a week, do some mission stuff, and I was hanging around with them like once a month. But dude, yeah, I can't even imagine to think about the stuff that was going on behind doors, as you mentioned, because I know there's stuff that I would catch one thing would be here, and I'd be like, God, that doesn't seem right. But like, okay, everyone's quirky. Everybody has some quirks. No, I certainly do. If you tore my part of life, you'd find all kinds of stuff that's inconsistent. But just imagine what, the things that you see. And this gets back to the beginning. There's things we know and there's things we don't know. If I could obviously rewind the clock back a year and a half ago, I would never have gotten involved with these people, but I've learned things about them since, and I've come to understand that my thoughts were wrong. And it could be the case, Oz. Why do I keep calling you Oz? You don't look nothing like that guy. You're much more handsome than Oz. Bryce. Okay, Bryce. It could be the case in a year and a half that I learned some stuff about, trans people that totally convinces my mind, that totally changes me. I'm open to those ideas, but I just would like to be respected where I'm at in my journey. I'm trying to find answers. I'm trying to find the truth. And people just naturally get defensive of themselves and their positions if you come at them attacking them, So that kind of like thinking in those ways just kind of like shuts down the it shuts down the ability to progress forward. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with you. And I would say that if you're like, that kind of answered the question I asked you earlier, are you willing to
Mm-hmm.
learn more about it? And if you are,
Mm-hmm.
then I would encourage you to have more conversations with people who are, members of the trans community. It's,
Yeah.
there's a lot of different perspectives, but if you want the perspective of the transgender community, I would recommend talking to transgender
Sure.
people. You can talk to ally. Like, I would consider myself an ally of the trans community, but I'm not actually transgender. I haven't lived that
Right. Yes.
experience.
Yes.
I accidentally misgendered V earlier,
Right.
as you did, and so yeah, I'm
Right.
not a perfect person. Nobody is.
Sure. Sure.
But if you want to empathize more and you want to understand where the common ground is, you have to be willing to have those conversations. And the conversation has to be more than just about, let's find the areas where we already agree and only talk about that.
Right.
You have to be willing to figure out where you don't agree and why you don't agree. And is there something I don't know that you know? And if there's something that
Yeah,
you don't
exactly.
know that I can teach you, that type of thing.
Absolutely. So, you have a good head on your shoulders and good thoughts on that. I mean, I'll tell you this. I find a lot of conversations I have with Christians to be kind of boring because one, I already know most of the things that they're going to believe in, so it's like, there's not much opportunity for me to learn. I mean, there is some opportunity to learn in some regards, but it's for a lot of times there's just like, if I talk to a Trumpster, I could already tell precisely where that conversation is going to go. Like, we don't even need to have the conversation to know exactly where it's going to go. Whereas some of these talks that we have, I prefer talking, we've talking to Muslims, Jews, Hindus, Buddhists, agnostic, just about everything in between there.
Have you ever tried talking to a Christian who was also transgender or homosexual or bisexual or anything of that sort? Because they're out there, That might be interesting.
So it's not a matter of not trying. It's not a matter of not trying. It's just, again, people will shut me down. Oz, Bryce. Okay, I'm gonna if I cause you Oz again, I'm gonna slap myself out of principle. I don't know why I keep doing that, but
okay.
It's totally legitimate mistake. I'm misgendering you.
You misnamed
that way.
me. That's okay.
I'll miss dead name. Yeah. And actually, just one quick thing, because now you've learned what dead naming is. What are your thoughts about atheists who dead name your friend Khalil Allah, and they call him his pre-Muslim name, which is Justin?
Well, he's not my friend. He's just he's an acquaintance of mine. We know each other, but we're not really. But I mean, I would say that I call people by what they want to be called, and I just think that is. I don't want people calling me. You're a Christian. You believe in the golden rule, right? Do unto others.
Yeah.
You would have to, right. So if you believe in that, and you don't want somebody calling you a name that you don't like, or just a name that isn't even your own, why would you do it to someone else? And so I just call people what they want to be called.
That's not the question I asked you there. I didn't say, what do you call him? I said, what do you think about the atheists who deliberately go out of their way to dead name that guy? Because it's like
I disagree with it because they're not calling people. So I think it is the answer to your question. I think that people should be called what they want to be called. So if somebody is calling you something that is not what you want to be called, then I wouldn't want to have anything to do with that person.
So you're willing to call? No, that's great. If you're willing to call that abusive behavior, because to me, it doesn't matter if I see a Christian engaging in hate speech or speech that I know that they're trying to do something to hurt someone. That is irrelevant to me. That has no relevance whatsoever if you're Christian or Buddhist or God forbid Scientologist. Like, if I see bad behavior like that, I'm going to call it out, period. I could not give a good goddamn if I agree with you or not. It's like, I'm going to call out abusive behavior, period. So
what do you think?
Anyway,
why do you think that they would call somebody by the wrong name?
Because atheists engage in very cultish type thinking.
So you think it's an atheist thing? You don't think it's just a individual behavior? Because I think anyone of any demographic can do that. I don't think that's something that atheists do as a part of atheism.
I believe I've seen it. I've seen guys, Bryce, say that my daughter's going to grow up and be a prostitute, and guys are going to run gangbangs on her inside of these atheist groups, because I've made it known that with the trans issue, it's like I just don't believe that that's going to help the person. If I get changed, then I do.
I think you kind of misunderstood my question. So let me ask it a different way.
I believe there's double standards. Atheists use extreme double standards. Extreme.
I guess I'm not really asking. I'm not asking a question about atheists. I'm talking about people in general. Why would anyone, do you think, call someone
dead name?
by? Yes. Why do you think that they would dead name someone?
Because they're disrespectful of people's religion, people's deeply held beliefs. You want us to normalize atheism, and you want us to respect pronouns and not dead name people. But then you'll turn around and show total. And I'm talking about you. I'm talking about just what I call evangelical atheism, or like the cult of atheism, that you're willing to not. And again, not you, but you're willing to engage in some like extreme levels of. I'm not sure if you want to call it cognitive dissonance. If you want to call it just total.
You know what steel manning is?
It's like. I'm sorry?
Do you know what steel manning is?
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's the opposite of straw manning. Like if you try to find
I know exactly what it is.
Would you be able to steel man a person's argument if they were dead naming someone? Could you figure out a way that they would actually explain themselves about why they feel the need to do that?
Nope, I can't. I wouldn't be able to do that for a trans person, and I wouldn't be able to do that for a. The only I can think of is just a total disrespect, total disregard of the other person. And so,
I can't. Do you mind if I try?
You be my guest all day long. You asked me if I could do it. I can't. This gets down to what I'm going to be able to think of inside of my own mind. And if I tell you that that's a still man, that I would be lying. But go ahead.
Is it possible that someone who dead names someone, the reason that they're doing it is because they actually feel like the name that your mother gave you is your true name, and when you're calling yourself something else, trying to represent yourself as part of a community that you may be new to or may not know much about, you're actually being disrespectful to your family and your friends and everybody who knew you as the name that your mother gave you? Is it possible that someone who dead names could hold that position?
Sure, why not? I don't know. Okay. I generally don't know, but that's possible.
So that would be my strongest steel man argument for someone who does that. Now, keep in mind, that's not me justifying the behavior. I disagree with the behavior. And my counter argument to that would be names, just like gender, are social constructs. They're made up. There's no such thing as a name, but what the person calls themselves. And so if someone changes their name, which they can do, then you no longer have an argument that you ought to call them by a different name.
And if I'm telling you, I would not be able to articulate what you just said right now. I wouldn't be able to do it because I don't believe that someone could actually hold that to that view. Really, I may be wrong. I'm not the smartest person on the planet, but I don't believe someone could actually hold to that view. I believe that if you're doing so, it's because you want to inflict some kind of damage. You want to improve you want to get some kind of points with your community. You want to seem cool because you're.
The good news is if you can knock down the steel man argument, then you can knock down any version of the argument, right? Because that's the strongest version of the argument. So, so now you have a counter argument for the steel man dead namer.
Thank you. You got any last thoughts? We're about to wrap this up. We're a little bit longer than I thought, but about to wrap this up.
I mean, yes, but I mean, probably not things appropriate for the show. I think that there's probably a larger conversation to be had that we could probably have offline. There's a few things that you mentioned during the course of the show. I didn't want to derail us too much, but I agreed with a lot of what you said. There were a few things you said that I found questionable, but wouldn't be appropriate to go into here. But there's probably a few more things. I would be willing to have another conversation if you are.
Absolutely. I really appreciate it. And if you could be so kind as to help me to get a transgender person to come on. One of the things I'm going to give you right now is we're supporting five nonprofits. I just want to explain these to you real quick. One is Combatants for Peace. It's an Israeli and Palestinian peace organization. actually gotten to go into the home of reformed terrorists. Here's a picture with me with a reformed terrorist right here. You can see that. And they're working with members of Jewish people whose children died as a result of terrorist attacks. So we're supporting that. They're working together now, which is great. Next one is the Three Rivers Project, which is brings attention to the North Korea problem and helps with some humanitarian stuff there. The other one is Hate is Wrong. It's an anti-bullying for the LGBT community by Sarah Tuwalo, which is he's a former football player who is gay and in the NFL. The other one is Beyond Barriers, which is an anti-extremist groups that helps people in hate groups leave these hate, like the KKK or Nazis and stuff. And the other one is Kumfa, which is the Korean Unwed Mothers Family Association, which helps Korean single mothers here because it can be very difficult. So which one of those five would you like us to make a donation to?
How about the last one with the Korean
Kumfa.
mothers? So you live in
Really?
Korea, right? So that would be something close to home for you.
Well, thank you. I was 100% certain that you were going to say the anti-bullying for the LGBT community, but thank you for that. I really appreciate
maybe
that.
That's why I chose a different one.
It's just to prove me wrong.
No, but
okay.
Actually,
so the last thing,
actually, I do think that the last one that you mentioned would be something, since it's close to home for you. You know, I think that would be that would put you in a positive mood.
well, any chance you've ever saw the series Squid Game?
I saw the first episode.
Watch it all. It's really good. But you don't know this, but the 7th episode has these VIPs come in from America, and we interviewed them on the podcast. And one of them was telling us about growing up as like a single mother, growing up with a single mother. And my mom was a single mother before she met my dad. So it is definitely something that touches a lot closer to home than most people, because I know that can cause a lot of issues, especially when you start getting into like half brothers. And I don't consider my brother a half brother, but I mean, I'm certain he doesn't feel totally a part of our immediate family. You know, the three fully biological kids. I don't see halves or quarters or whatever, anything like that. So, but anyway, it can be an issue for unwed mothers. So, yeah. That being said, I want to thank you for joining me today, Bryce. Got it right, Bryce. That's fine if you say that you. I hope I try to present things as honestly, and
I think you did.
I try to be as if I talk about some of these things, man, it literally just makes me cry. Like I can't discuss some of these things, especially some of the abuse that I've endured and overcome, and knowing people are still suffering with that. It's one of the reasons why I talk about these things, because I do want people to know that it's okay to seek help, and you can overcome feelings of inadequacy or just not totally accepting where you are right now. Like that's just my thing, is just trying to get people to love themselves and accept themselves. And I'm not always the best messenger for that, but I certainly try. And I would say that I certainly try. But I just want to thank you for joining me today at RG Podcast. Check us out at www.rgpodcast.com. Check us out on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We're trying to have conversations like this and not letting the field get dominated by people like Darth Dawkins or Antangelo, who generally want to hurt people in these conversations. Yeah, please leave us a comment. Tell us what you thought about this. And we look forward to seeing you back again. Bye.